Greetings my viewers and welcome to the new Elder Player Scrolls experience online, or whatever this video is going to end up being called. The new High Isle expansion has probably already launched since I'm slow as fuck when it comes to editing, but if it hasn't yet and this video's out, I'll just auto-pat myself on the back. Alright, so you're wondering how the overall new player experience is in Elder Scrolls Online, right? Basically, you start up in a prison, like in every Elder Scrolls game out there. You're already being judged for something you have no recollection of doing. You probably got drunk in some inn and accidentally summoned the Daedric Prince upon your fellow buddies until the guards came in and ruined your fun.
Stop right there, criminal scum!
Nah, I'm just kidding. You do start in a prison once you create a character though. But okay, let's start over. ESO is a buy-to-play MMORPG with an optional subscription that gives you additional goodies which we'll get later into the video. To start playing, you will need to own a machine powerful enough to allow you to like this video and subscribe to this channel, and also purchase one of the available versions either on Steam, Stadia or their official website for PC, or the Xbox and PlayStation stores for consoles. My advice if you want to get in is this: if there is a sale, go for a collection edition. If there is no sale, grab the standard one. You can always upgrade later down the road. The standard edition lets you enjoy the core game content as well as the Morrowind expansion. This is more than enough for beginners as there's plenty of stuff to go through, and it also allows you to slowly dig in and understand the game without getting overwhelmed much by the amount of new quests and features and systems popping up everywhere. One thing you'll also need to know firsthand about the game is that there's a major focus over here for the story content, the lore, as there's plenty of it. All the NPCs you'll encounter are fully voiced or blind to most of your crimes, there's tons of lore books, and all the mud crabs can be killed. Oh, and much more. Oh, and you can fish, that's pretty cool. Many would argue that ESO rather feels like a single player game sometimes, especially with the way content is scaled to your personal power wherever you go, which makes the overall difficulty on the overland maps rather easy. This does not mean, however, that there's no hard content out there. There's raids, veteran dungeons, and some pretty chunky world bosses, and there's also PvP, which is a hellhole, like in every game. To summarize it before we move on to the next topic, ESO has a lot to offer for any type of casual and hardcore players. You'll easily be able to spend hundreds of hours and still not explore every system and feature properly. So let's see, you snatched the game and it's time to jump in. There's no servers over here, just Omega servers. I mean, you just select between the EU or NA Mega server. After that, as with every MMORPG out there, you create and customize your character. There are several races and classes you can choose from. Each race belongs to one of the 3 factions that are predominant throughout the game. The Daggerfall Covenant, which has the Breton, the Redguard and the Orcs. The Ebonheart Pact, which has the Nord, the Argonians and the Dark Elves. And the Altmeri Dominion, also commonly known as the Best Faction Dominion, lore accurate by the way, which hosts the Khajiit, the Bosmer, and the High Elves. With the changes made in the past few years, the faction you choose will only matter in the open world PvP as you're stuck with your own faction group. What I recommend doing here is simply choose whatever you feel connects with you the most. Although some races have certain passives that could be beneficial depending on the type of class you want to play as. But I'm a casual, so I don't really care about all that. The customization is nice, it offers you a good amount of freedom to stand out and not risk meeting your doppelganger within the first hours on your journey. And the best part about it, you can add spaces to your character name. That alone makes this part much more enjoyable. Once you're done creating your perfect fantasy self, it's time to jump in. Like I mentioned, you start in a prison, which is a nice way to emphasize the idea of breaking free and starting a new life, of pursuing your own goals from now on. They've actually revamped the tutorial phase back in 2021 and made it so that every new player starts in the same single instanced area. It will take an average of 20 minutes to go through it, and it's a good way to show new players how the gameplay works, how to fight, how to block and bash, interrupt, all that good stuff. Aside from that, you also have the opportunity to test out most weapons and armors and overall get a good idea on what to expect and pursue. Once you reach the end of the tutorial, you're prompted to choose where you want to go next. This can be quite confusing at first, at least it was for me when I first started playing back in 2021. However, speaking with Norianwe should give you the cure for that confusion, as she'll just explain which area you can access and what each portal represents. Also, approaching each portal and interacting with it will get Norianwe closer, and she'll just explain what to expect in there. Basically, if you own any expansion, you can just straight up jump into it if that's what you want. My recommendation here, however, would be to just begin with the starting area of your own faction. That way you'll have an easier time with the lore and the overall gameplay mechanics. I have not delved much into each expansion just yet personally, but I do know Morrowind, for example, can be quite confusing for new players, especially if they straight up jump into it after the tutorial. Your journey to level 50 will take time, and I recommend you do not rush it, as the game can get overwhelming pretty fast if you just speedrun through the quests and levels. I strongly believe that when playing an MMORPG, it is important to give it the time to teach you how to properly progress in such a way that it becomes enjoyable to even simply wander around. For example, when I first began my adventures in ESO, I quickly noticed that each map has a number of main quests, side quests, points of interest, sky shards and more. As I was being armed with newfound knowledge, my primal collectionist instinct awakened, and I knew exactly what my goal was. I wanted to 100% that zone. I wanted to lick every single blade of grass so that when I was leaving I knew I was done with it completely. However, it took me a while to understand what each icon represented and how to achieve completion. This is because I didn't fully read what the tutorial prompts showed me, and I just focused my eyes on those shiny 1 out of 9 texts, which got my mind thinking on ways how to raise that number to 9 out of 9. Anyways, once you reach level 10, you will also unlock dungeons and battlegrounds, which, if it's something you like doing, can also speed up your leveling process and also award you with some really nice gear. As you level, you will also come to realize the importance of skill points, which can be acquired by collecting sky shards scattered throughout the maps and completing main quests, side quest chains and dungeon quests. These skill points will become essential as you'll eventually get interested in crafting, gathering, trying out new weapons and armors, and learning new skills in those, which will cost you skill points. There's a lot to discover, which is again why I recommend taking it slow. When I was leveling my handsome Khajiit to level 50 and beyond, I did notice something. The game did seem a little bit more challenging during its early phase as compared to when I reached level 50 and champion level 160 to start working on my semi-permanent gear and also skills. So if you're looking for a constant challenge, enjoy this leveling process as much as you can, because it's only going to get easier the more you progress. You will also find out how the combat works during this phase, as this is a touchy subject for both ESO players and people that don't play the game but have tried it at some point. Many feel like the combat is a little bit glitchy, I could say, with a few tricks that you can take advantage of in order to gain a higher damage per second. While playing, you'll soon come to hear of terms like light attack weaving, animation cancelling, heavy attack weaving, and so on. These are a bit tricky to explain, but the TLDR version is that you press left click to light attack and then you immediately cast a skill, after which you light attack again and so on. This basically cuts out the animation halfway and allows you to do more attacks and in turn, do more damage. It's a tad more complicated than that, but I personally didn't get much into this since I don't really focus on the competitive aspect in both PvE or PvP. Once you reach level 50, that's it. You won't gain regular levels anymore, and instead you will gain champion levels. The current champion level cap is 3600 and the gear is capped at the champion level 160. This is where the game starts opening up even more. You're not exactly behind closed doors before you reach level 50, since you can access most of the content. However, you can start optimizing and gearing up your character more permanently once you reach champion level 160. Each champion level also grants a point that you can use in the new skill tree that unlocks after you reach level 50. These can enhance your stamina, magic and health, as well as offer some interesting passives that can be quite nice and useful. I still consider this a beginner phase since there's still a lot to go through to discover. I've had a lot of fun after reaching level 50 since there was still things I had no clue about and I was just coming up upon them as I progressed. During this phase is also when I started looking over other features as well. I discovered you can turn into a werewolf and gain access to a whole new set of skills, as well as a vampire and do stuff, I think. The more I played and progressed throughout the game, the more interest I began to have in jumping out of my original routine and trying out the other features as well. There's freedom to be had here, the freedom to put pause on what you're currently doing and jump in the other side of Tamriel with an all new adventure or feature. That's a nice thing to have. It can get overwhelming if you peek your eye and try all of them at once, however, so I don't recommend doing that if you don't want to ruin your experience early on. Once again, this game works best if you take it slow. Now let's talk about the community a little bit, since this is where things get a little bit interesting. As per ZeniMax's last new player-oriented welcome video, their motto for the game is that it's designed to be played exactly the way you want to play it. And I personally find that to be quite true for both the game and its community. While adventuring throughout the world of Tamriel, you might find yourself requiring assistance of any kind, and asking in the chat will indeed get you in touch with some friendly people. Guilds that I've encountered have been super friendly so far as well, although since I'm more on the casual side, I can't really talk about how more serious and content-oriented guilds and groups are. One thing, however, that can ruin a new player's experience is hopping into a dungeon with random people. A thing so common and enjoyable in most MMOs can be a real hassle to deal with and a deal breaker for many people here. The issue itself comes from people that rush throughout the dungeon, leaving those that don't share the speed and enthusiasm behind, to be chomped down by the mobs and potentially losing loot from the bosses. This is a long discussed issue that's been present in the game for quite a while now, and there's still no real solution to it yet, unfortunately. I've encountered a few of these groups as well while I was leveling my character for the first time. It eventually made me just quit queuing altogether until I got strong enough to hold my ground in case it happened again. Some of the players that do these rushes do listen to reason when you ask them to, but I did encounter a few that completely ignore the request to slow down and also talk trash about it. Now, of course, many argue that if you do want to complete the quests within the dungeon and take your time with it, the best course of action would be to do the run along with friends or a guild, and that's true, as this is indeed a viable solution. However, as a player, you should not be forced to find a workaround to enjoy a feature that's advertised as enjoyable in the first place. Just throwing it out there. This is something you need to keep in mind if you plan on playing the game. Aside from this issue alone, there's not much that's going to bother you in your honeymoon phase of your journey. ESO has an interesting monetization. When the game originally released, it was a mess from what I hear. It was completely subscription based and there were a lot of issues. Then, when the One Tamriel mega update came, it all changed. The game became a first-person shooter. You had a battle pass and there was a battle dragon dropping players into a battle royale in Cyrodiil. Nah, I'm kidding. The game got overhauled a lot as they changed the monetization plan to a one-time purchase with an additional subscription called ESO Plus. Okay, so the whole thing can get quite confusing for new players, so I'll go ahead and explain it in a way I wish I would have had it explained it to me when I first started playing the game. Basically, each year ZeniMax Studios releases a new chapter, which is basically a new expansion. This usually introduces new systems, new zones, the usual. You will need to purchase this expansion in order to access it. Pretty straightforward so far, right? Now, where things get a little bit confusing is with the DLCs that come after each expansion release. Each chapter has around 3 or 4 DLCs from what I've noticed, and they continue the overall chapter story with new dungeons, zones, sets, and more. These DLCs will need to be purchased as well in order to access them. Besides chapters and DLCs, there's also base game updates. These are free for all players to enjoy and they usually bring in balance changes, new core game systems, and overhauls in general. As of now, the additions you can purchase when starting to play ESO only include the chapters, not the DLCs as well. So if you were to purchase the biggest, the baddest edition out there, you'd get the base game with the Morrowind, Somerset, Elsewhere, Greymoor, Blackwood, and High Isle expansions. Now that I look at it, there's a ton of content out there already, quite impressive actually. In total, there's around 19 additional DLCs that you'll need to purchase in order to get access to the whole content. But wait, before any current player stops the video and calls me a clickbaiter, listen to this. There's also the subscription called ESO Plus, which is $14.99 per month. Having this subscription active gives you access to all these DLCs and all the chapters except the current active one, as well as 1650 crowns per month to spend on anything in a crown store, double bank space, and the most important thing of all, which is why a majority of players keep this subscription active: the unlimited, bottomless, sexy, and incredible exquisite craft bag. This thing right here stores all your crafting materials and the overall junk you loot in an unlimited bag that's separate from your overall inventory. I personally never subbed to ESO Plus because of one single reason. I haven't experienced how the game is with the craft bag yet, so I don't know exactly how valuable it actually is. I know the benefits, but even with my hoarding addiction, I have managed to find a way to live without it. If I were to experience the pleasure of having such a helpful feature, I probably wouldn't be able to go back to not having it, so yeah. ESO Plus is worth it if you plan on playing this game a lot and you've got the money to spare monthly. There's also worth mentioning that you can also acquire the DLCs and chapters by trading your gold for crowns. There are communities out there that have verified traders through which you can do these kind of exchanges. I've done one myself and got the Clockwork City DLC that way. It turns out fishing can be quite a profitable activity in here. However, you cannot acquire the current expansion that's released right now with gold, as that can only be bought with hard cash. When the new expansion will release, the current expansion, being High Isle, will get turned into a big chunk DLC, which you will be able to purchase with gold. Aside from these, let's also talk about the Crown Store as well, since I barely mentioned it. I personally hate it. It has loot boxes. They bring in a lot of cash, I imagine, for ZeniMax Studios, but I still hate them with passion. You've got mounts, pets, skins, NPCs that can help you unload your trash or deposit in the bank. You've got houses, and overall mainly cosmetics. There's no pay to win items here though, which I deeply appreciate. Just pay for convenience, I guess. If you've got ESO Plus, the crowns they give you monthly can be quite useful to spend around the shop, or buy the DLCs in previous chapters if you wish so. Hope all of that clears things up a little bit, because I know from personal experience the whole monetization can get pretty confusing. ESO is a fun game. The fact that it's buy to play and does not have a mandatory subscription is a good move. This type of gear progression is somewhat similar to Guild Wars 2, which I already covered in another video, although I find it to be much more pleasant in here, as ZeniMax Studios constantly adds new set bonuses to play with in each DLC and chapter release, which come out quite often. There's a lot I haven't talked about, but I'll leave that for a future video since there's so many features. The amount of lore, quests, and activities you have in the game is quite incredible, and it definitely deserves the right to be called a top MMORPG. The only downsides I've seen so far are the encounters you have within the dungeons, as well as the very limited edition mounts and collectibles that can obtain only during seasonal events, as these don't usually come back. Oh, and the store mounts and collectibles that you miss will then only be obtainable in loot boxes. But let's forget about that hellhole of a store. Although, about the seasonal event collections, I believe this is soon going to change as they're slowly bringing in back the collectibles from past events, so there's still hope. If you're still on the fence about trying it but do consider it a little bit, I would recommend watching more content about it from other creators such as Brah We Got This, which has an extensive list of guides for both new players and veteran players, as well as Artea and NefSQC, which are very passionate ESO creators that focus on raids, dungeons, and gold making in general. And if this game does not interest you at all, it's all good. I find it to be a little bit different from other MMORPGs, and I can completely understand why it won't be to the liking of many. So there we go. This is my opinion on the new player experience in Elder Scrolls Online. This video is a part of a series I'm trying to make in which I showcase how the overall new player experience can be in a specific MMORPG, and I try to make them in a way that is different from a new player guide or top things you don't want to miss when starting to play XMMO. I may not succeed in doing the highest quality of a video just yet, but I am learning as I create more. I'm also curious to hear how your new player experience was like in ESO. If you've enjoyed this video, I would greatly appreciate that like button being pressed, as it helps me a lot on my growth here on YouTube. If you also want to be kept up to date with my new content, the subscribe is also there to assist. With that being said, our time has come to an end. My name is Cloaked and I bid you farewell.